Good Thursday morning, everyone. KJ here. How's everybody doing? The week is just flying by, isn't it? I wanted to let y'all know that I posted on the community wall the live stream of Corey Richens' pretrial, I guess their question and answer deal there, the docket. Was streaming it, and I dipped in this morning, and you know that old saying that says, I love it when a plan comes together. Well, I had no idea that Corey Richens was going to have a hearing this morning, and when I clicked on it, because I subscribe to the docket, you should as well. Eric's a fabulous guy, and he always comes up with the best streams. I realized that things were just a little different. The defense attorney was asking a messload of questions to the judge, and the judge was basically answering her questions. The whole hearing was about a change of venue, and it was also about possibly Corey getting out on bail, and I thought, damn, this is going to be good. But they never really got to it. They answered each other's questions and all of that, and they rescheduled all of those motions for November. I highly recommend you go and watch that stream. Hit the like button for the docket, because there are so many answers that I didn't know. And y'all, when it comes to the crime genre community, for whatever reason, you watch trials or hear about cases and all of that. Oh, KJ, you know, I've got to learn something. I've got to learn things that I don't know. It can't just be, what did they do? Let's nail their ass to the wall. Let's get some justice for the victims. That's very important. But it's also about learning, y'all. I mean, that is a way of growing. And KJ absolutely, you know, it does. The plan came together because I had no idea that I would learn something just dipping in on that. And to get to what we're going to talk about today, it kind of dovetails with each other. Good morning, Canyon Jam. Susan Honecker, Cindy Arnold, K-Tech, April Gann, Trevor Levesque, Kathy Mama Bear. Thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. Madonna, hello, Madonna. How are you? I hadn't seen you in a while. So where are we going today? You know what, y'all? There's millions and millions of YouTube channels. And this is just a little corner of YouTube. The Rays and I and others get together, and we all have our own reasons for being here. But KJ's reason is justice through understanding. What does that mean to me? What does that mean to you? Well, part of it is I want to learn. And I want to apply it to cases that are going through the system right now. And if you'll just bear with me, you'll understand where I'm coming from. There are two cases right now down in Florida. One of them, y'all, it's coming up October 7th with jury selection, is Sarah Boone. Many of y'all are ready to watch that one. And then we have this Brie Con in Florida, who right now, just yesterday, the defense rested. Okay? What are we going to learn here today, y'all? We're going to learn something. You'll be glad you came. We're going to do it together. What are we going to talk about? Defense of battered wife syndrome. Do you know what that is? You know, most people think, and I did before I really started learning about it, it's just where women in either a marriage or a relationship or something who's been with their spouse or significant other for, you know, several years or whatever, this vicious cycle of physical, verbal, mental, sexual abuse. And that's what I thought. But then, you know, that is part of it, but that's not the whole thing. And folks, when it comes to a defendant wanting to say, I want to have the defense of battered wife syndrome, you got Sarah Boone and you have this Brie Con out of Florida that both were going to do this. Now, what is battered wife syndrome. You think you know what it's all about? I'm fixing to let into it. Psychologist Lenore Walker coined the phrase battered woman syndrome in the 70s, y'all. It is a subspecies. Now think about this. It's a subspecies of post-traumatic stress disorder, y'all, that describes a psychological response of a woman confronted with repeated violence in an intimate relationship. Battered wife syndrome was defined by Lenore Walker in 1979, who described a battered woman. Now here's the definition, y'all, is a woman 18 years of age or older who is or has been in an intimate relationship with a man who repeatedly subjects or subjected her to forceful physical and or psychological abuse. There's the definition right there. Now this Lenore Walker, think about this, y'all. It is used in courtrooms all over the country when a woman kills her husband, whether it's murder, whether it ends up being self-defense. This Lenore Walker outlines her theory of this syndrome, this cycle of domestic violence in 3 phases. Number 1, tension building. Number 2, acute battering incident. 3, contrition. 4, kindness. The 4th element, kindness, described by some as the honeymoon phase, is the essential aspect that continually draws these women to remain in the cycle. Why are we going to talk about this today as it relates to these 2 cases? Because Sarah Boone is fixing to go on trial, and I'm here to tell you, after it's all said and done today, I guarantee you she will take the stand if she's using battered wife or battered woman syndrome, okay? Because yesterday, and if you'll go to the live stream of yesterday's hearing in Florida with this Brie Con, it's Kahn, you'll see that a lot of answers to questions that I had about this whole situation and using it in self-defense were answered for me. Remember, they're under the same statutes, legal theories, and all. But to get to that, I'm going to remind y'all of these 2 cases. And then we're going to learn some things, and it's going to blow your mind if you're one of these type of people that love to learn. If you're going to get into the crime genre community, it's one thing to skim off the top of what you're wanting to get out of it. It's another to actually learn something that could help you moving forward, whether it's in the Sarah Boone trial or any other trial. Because, folks, make no mistake, women all over the United States of America are using this self-defense type of woman's battered syndrome all over the country, and we're going to see it time and time again. Now, some would say they use it to get out of their culpability for murdering people, and perhaps Sarah Boone and this other woman, this Brie woman out of Florida, who shot her husband in the back 4 times, and freaking he was in a garage, she'd locked him up in there. The bottom line is these women are still using this defense all over the country. Now, let's just get through the preliminaries, then we'll get to it. Orange County Police arrested Sarah Boone, 45, for the 2020 death of her boyfriend, 42-year-old George Torres Jr., after he died inside of a suitcase in their home. And most of us know these preliminary things, but I've got to go through the whole shield here. According to the report, the incident took place on February 23rd of 2020 in their Goldenrod area apartment. During the investigation, Boone told police that the couple had been drinking wine and playing a game of hide and seek. And let's all not forget, last live stream, Kathy Mama Bear brought it up. How can you play hide and seek if you're zipping someone else up into a suitcase? You know where the hell they're at, right? But that's neither here nor there at this point. We're going to get to this. Y'all are going to be glad that you tuned into this. After becoming too tired, Boone claimed to have gone to bed and passed out. The defendant woke up several hours later after hearing her phone ringing. Torres's body was found zipped inside of a suitcase where he was unresponsive and not breathing. Boone contacted the police, who pronounced him dead on arrival. Upon further inspection, detectives found videos on her phone that showed differently. The video shows Torres trapped inside of a suitcase on the couple's living room floor. Torres was heard repeatedly calling out to Boone. In several instances, Torres told Boone that he couldn't breathe. "Yeah, that's what you do when you choke me," Boone responded in the video, "and keep in the backdrop the battered woman's syndrome, okay?" The rest of the video shows Torres struggling to get out of the suitcase. Boone is heard telling her boyfriend that he deserves to suffer for everything you've done to me, says Sarah Boone. During the pretrial hearing on January 17th of 2023, Boone's defense attorney told the judge that the case was not yet ready. He stated that it was still necessary to meet with the defendant and find defense experts for the trial. Boone's defense attorney has also stated that he plans to apply the battered spouse syndrome defense in the case. Y'all, that was all the way back in January. You know, Sarah Boone has gone through attorneys just as much as Lori Hussey Daybell had people between her legs. The bottom line is that is the backdrop. In an announcement that left the judge momentarily speechless, Sarah Boone's new attorney announced that she would be relying on an argument of self-defense at her upcoming murder trial. Boone is charged with second-degree murder. We'll go through that. James Owens, who stepped in for Boone's ninth attorney after she struggled to briefly represent herself pro se, told Judge Michael Kranick at a motion hearing on Thursday, quote, "We're using battered spouse syndrome for the defense, not an accident." The news shocked Judge Kranick, who paused after confirming, "Are you claiming self-defense?" "Well, that's the first time I've heard of that," said the judge. Boone and Torres had a violent relationship, and Court TV found several charges filed against Torres in the years before his death relating to allegedly beating on Sarah Boone. Owens has retained two experts to testify on Boone's behalf to say she suffered from battered spouse syndrome, one of whom recently testified for Marcia Thompson, who was acquitted of murdering her husband based on the same evidence. But prosecutors are trying to block Boone from using the defense at all. In videos from police body-worn cameras at the scene after she called 911 and in interrogations in the days following, Boone repeatedly told investigators that the two had been having a fun night and that Torres had gotten into the suitcase as part of a game of hide and seek. Prosecutors suggested that proceeding with this defense would force Boone, now listen y'all, would force Boone to take the stand to testify in a narrative style similar to Robert Tellis. Y'all remember the Robert Tellis trial, who was recently convicted of murdering investigative journalist Jeff German. In a ruling released the next day, y'all, Judge Kranick said he would allow the defense to use the battered spouse syndrome defense and mention it in their opening statements. The order requires Sarah Boone to submit to an examination by an expert of the state's choosing no later than September 26th. Well, folks, today is September 26th. And by today, Sarah Boone is going to have to sit down with someone that the state chooses, and they're going to pick her brain on all of this. Kathy Mama Bear says, "Dear Trolls, today is not the day, and this is not the channel for your nonsense. Thank you. Enjoy your trip to Block Island." So, we know that that's going, this trial's coming up for Sarah Boone. And I ran across this other trial that was currently going on about this Brie Con. And some of y'all know who this is. But if you'll just take a moment to think about where we're going with this, I think it will enlighten you a lot. Hello, Thunder T Games. Brie Con, y'all, out of Florida, just as Sarah Boone is out of Florida. They are going to have to look at Florida case law and all of this. Chief Petty Officer Brie Con was stationed on board Naval Air Station Pensacola, is indicted with the first-degree premeditated murder of her husband, Colin Turner, after allegedly shooting him 4 times while he was locked in a garage on September 8th of 2021. And prosecutor Mark Alderman said a simple 911 phone call indicates the facts of what happened. As Colin Turner is on the recorded phone call to 911, the defendant opens the door to the garage and shoots him 4 times in the back while he's on the phone, Alderman told the jury Tuesday morning. According to Alderman and portions of the 911 call played in court, Coon allegedly locked Turner out of the house until Santa Rosa County Sheriff's deputies told her he had a right to be inside the house. But then Turner called the department for a second time after he ended up being locked in the garage. While in the garage, Turner said that Brie Con locked me in the garage and tried breaking my arm when he attempted to get back into the home. In the middle of Turner explaining the situation to the dispatcher, a loud bang followed by Turner yelling can be heard in the recorded call. The dispatcher said, "What was that?" And Turner said, "She just shot me." And the call then picks up 3 additional shots followed by silence. Now, so the defense on opening and all this started to paint this Colin Turner as this terrible, terrible husband. And remember, they were going to go for this battered woman syndrome. And this is what the defense had said in opening. He had issues with his brain, and you're going to hear Brie say, "You're unstable. You're a danger to the kids. We're not talking about a normal person here," said her attorney. The defense claims that Coon suffered mental, physical, and even sexual abuse at the hands of Turner that began well before the defendant was stationed in Pensacola. Before Turner made his 2 911 calls, Coon was the first to call the police, saying that Turner had shoved her to the floor during an argument, a call the jury heard during the first day of trial. That mixed with Turner wanting to take their 3 children to his parents' home in Georgia, and the firearms Turner kept around the house and in his truck, according to Etheridge, which is Brie's defense attorney, led Coon to believe he would seriously harm the family. And her attorney said he had threatened to kill these kids before, and her as well. She was worried he was going to take the kids and kill them. This is not a normal man we're dealing with. And then he says the question from the testimony is going to be, how far do you have to go before you let someone hurt your children? But the prosecutors argue most of Brie Coon's claims haven't been verified. And when I say that, when I say most of this woman's things, these allegations haven't been verified, let's just keep in mind that Sarah Boone actually has documentation of her and this guy here that got zipped up in the suitcase. They've had past run-ins with the law. He's been arrested and stuff. But none of this is in this case. Most of the defense's case will rely on their expert witness, Dr. Julie Harper, who will likely testify on behalf of Brie Con, saying the defendant could be suffering from battered spouse syndrome due to Turner's alleged actions. Alderman says Harper will testify to Con telling her Turner would threaten to drown the kids or kill the family and would physically and mentally abuse his wife. However, the prosecutor says that's all solely based on Coon's version of events. So the prosecution says, you'll see the source of all these stories were from the defendant to Dr. Harper. There's no verification, documentation of any of these allegations. So it's just what she's telling Dr. Harper. Now, as of yesterday, it was bared out, and I highly recommend you go back and watch yesterday's hearing on that, because I learned that in the state of Florida, y'all, in the state of Florida, if you are going to have a woman's, the battered woman's defense there, according to statute and code, The only way that can happen is that this woman, Brie, would have had to take the stand and tell her whole story of how she felt like she was a battered woman and had the syndrome and all of that. And then the experts could come in and talk about what her testimony was. It was the only way. And because it is that way in statute and code in the state of Florida, the defense rested yesterday, not even going to call this Dr. Harper, because the judge said, hey, if she doesn't testify, and your expert gets up there and talks about how the expert had talked to this woman, then that is inadmissible hearsay. The state has no way of being able to verify the truth of that. They can't cross-examine that. That is why this Brie Con would have had to testify. She got up in court yesterday and said it was not her desire to testify. And so the defense said, we won't be calling Dr. Harper, and they rested their case. Currently, they're going to do closings and rebuttal today. And so if you're interested, dip in on that. Donna Donald says both should have removed themselves. Maybe the man was the one being abused. And we're talking about Sarah Boone. But this other case in Florida that has now rested and they're fixing to have closings, this woman was going to use the battered woman syndrome as a defense. And what's interesting about it, y'all, is I thought it was some kind of mental health illness type of thing that's brought on by abuse. But I learned so much more about it. And I want to share that with you. So down the road, when you do have to run into this self-defense of woman's battered syndrome, and it has been successful in some cases, that you know to be on the lookout for all of the earmarks of it. This Lenore Walker, who coined the phrase and researched it, she absolutely got down to the nitty-gritty of it. I'm going to be looking in Nova Law Review, which is a peer-reviewed type of paper from a Sarah M. Sandler, and it's entitled Battered Woman Syndrome, Setting a Standard in Florida. So we've narrowed it down now. We can look at it and say, Sarah Boone's in Florida, this Brie was in Florida. We know now, I know why she did not testify and how they were not able to bring forth this battered woman syndrome and could not bring in an expert. So defining battered woman syndrome as it pertains to what we are going to be witnessing in terms of Sarah Boone's trial coming up, the details of everything that's going to be laid out by the state or the defense in terms of exhibits, witness testimony, and I guarantee you Sarah Boone will take the stand as they move forward, and I guarantee you she is meeting either today or she already has up to this point with an expert to basically find evidence that she has battered woman syndrome. Despite the reference to a constellation of medical and psychological conditions, battered woman syndrome is a type of post-traumatic stress disorder, not a form of mental illness, y'all. Now, I really perked up on that, y'all, because some of y'all know back in 2007, I didn't really go into detail. I developed and was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? And so this, whenever something I've been diagnosed with, and by the way, this Brie Con yesterday, the state got up and said, while we're talking about whether or not this expert's going to testify and whether this Brie's going to testify, there's never been any documentation that this woman, Brie Con, had post-traumatic stress disorder. And I couldn't understand, well, why are they talking about post-traumatic stress disorder if this is battered woman syndrome? I just didn't know. And of course, y'all know me. I'm going to go and I'm going to delve in it and I'm going to figure out what the hell's going on. But there are 4 general characteristics of battered woman syndrome. And y'all, let me just take a moment to say this. It wouldn't get past me if there's one or more. people that would watch this live stream or on the rewatch that perhaps have these symptoms. KJ, I got into physical abuse with my ex years ago. I don't feel like I have battered woman syndrome now that I've educated myself on it. Post-traumatic stress disorder had nothing to do with my ex-husband. It was something else. It was a very traumatic experience for me that was later on. But what I'm saying is some of you, maybe not, might have these issues or know someone, another woman, maybe a sister, an aunt, a grandmother, someone that have these issues. And I just feel like, if there's some way that I can learn something and share it, then I just leave it in God's hands. That's what I do. But there are 4 general characteristics of battered woman syndrome. Number 1, the woman believes that the violence was her fault. Number 2, the woman has an inability to place the responsibility for the violence elsewhere. She's not going to look at anything else or anyone or any circumstance or anything. She's not going to put it anywhere else. She's going to think that she's the reason that the violence happened. Number 3, the woman fears for her life and of her children's lives. And number 4, the woman has an irrational belief that the abuser is all powerful, that knows all. And, sometimes people, they don't see it like that. It's cut and dry. They don't realize that's going on until they get inside and do some self-care. But Dr. Walker describes 9 common characteristics of a battered woman, including low self-esteem. I've got that, y'all. I've had that. A belief in the feminine sex role stereotype. Now, so I grew up very conservative. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I believe in Holy Scripture. I don't believe that, I look at it as a stereotype, but in my view, y'all, I don't believe that women are weak or anything. I just personally, and whether you disagree with that, just understand that everyone has their own beliefs, and I have to respect and honor other people, and I hope people understand I have my beliefs. I do believe the man is over the woman. That's just me, though. Doesn't mean that Wayne gets to call all the shots. I have equal footing with him. We both get along. We're best friends. It's just the way it is as far as I was raised in my faith and belief system. So, low self-esteem, a belief in the feminine sex role stereotype. I don't really look at that as a stereotype. But accepting responsibility for her abuser's actions, suffering from severe stress reactions, and a belief that no one is able to help her get out of her abusive situation. Again, I've never had this syndrome. I'm just laying it out here. There are some things that like PTSD and low self-esteem and things like that I can understand. But it's got to be the full meal deal. Certain characteristics like low self-esteem and the belief in a stereotypical female role make it easier to fall into an abusive relationship, while characteristics such as accepting responsibility and a belief that no one can help make it easy to remain in an abusive relationship. Taken as a whole, such qualities push a battered woman into what Dr. Walker describes as learned helplessness. And from there, the battered woman experiences an endless cycle of violence. So what is learned helplessness? Again, y'all, when these defenses come up, battered woman syndrome, I want to be fully educated on it. I want to know, because what if it doesn't come out in trial every aspect that I would need to know to look for? Is this woman's defense claim? Is this woman, think about Sarah Boone. Did she have a learned helplessness with this Taurus fella? These are things that you think about, or at least I do. Learned helplessness stems from the principle of the learning theory. Now, remember, the old slogan, y'all, truth truth, logic, common sense, that gut feeling, and just a little bit of psychoanalysis? Well, this is psychology. And you can say, well, I really like to watch these trials. I really like to learn what happens. I want to see justice and adjudication in action. But you're learning about psychology as well. And the learning theory, which is based on the way a person reacts to the outcomes of his or her voluntary responses in his or her environment. In other words, whatever your reaction is, whatever's going on in your environment, whether it's from someone else, whether it's just standing out here in the front yard, your reactions, it's a learning theory. For example, here's one, y'all. If a voluntary response changes the circumstances of a situation or creates a positive outcome, a person is likely to repeat that response. You know, it's like the old thing that I learned in Psychology 101. They were training like animals, like mice or whatever. If the mice did a certain thing, a little button, I mean, like if they pushed a button, that little piece of corn would come down, and that mouse would know if it did it every time that it would get that. That's like, you know, getting what it's a positive response from what you're doing. And what this response is reinforcement. And many of y'all know what that means. Something reinforced. Something that if you keep, you know, if you do this, you're going to get this. And it never changes. It's a positive. It might be a different positive, but it's still a positive outcome. You're going to continue to do it. It's called reinforcement. Once a person expects that a certain response will produce a specific outcome, and that outcome is in fact achieved, that person feels as though he or she has control of the situation. However, when a person expects a certain outcome to occur through a certain response, and that outcome does not occur, a person often needs an explanation as to why his or her expected outcome was not achieved. And if no explanation can be offered after time, the person assumes he or she has no control over the outcome and learns what type of things he or she does and does not have control over in his or her environment. And this goes back to battered woman syndrome. We're talking about what does a woman do when he balls up that fist and hits her. Well, she's got to find a way to get him to stop. And she learns over time that either she does a certain way, if she fights back, it's going to be worse, etc., etc. According to the learning theory, once a person realizes that they're not in control of certain situations, they will lose motivation to respond to those situations, even if they are later able to make changes that will affect the outcome. Applying the learning theory to battered women, learned helplessness is the theory to which some victims of recurring abuse will eventually succumb. This is based on the notion that they cannot change their abusive situation and instead become subservient in order to reduce incidents of violence. There are three basic components to the learned helplessness theory: information about what will happen, thinking or cognitive representations about what will happen, and behavior toward what does happen. It is the second component that leads to emotional disturbances, as this is where a person develops their expectations and beliefs as to what outcomes should occur. The key difference between those who react with the learned helplessness response and those who do not stems from the person's actual beliefs and expectations as to what they have control over. If a person does not have control over a situation, but believes that he or she does have control, that person's behavior will not be affected. However, if a person does in fact have control, excuse me, y'all. Thus, once a battered woman believes she has no control over her abusive situation, she becomes helpless. She allows what she believes to be out of her control to actually become out of her control, and learns to expect the abuse as a way of life over which she has no influence. So there is a cycle theory of violence, y'all. And through her studies, Dr. Walker found that the battered women are not constantly being abused, nor is their abuse inflicted at totally random times. Instead, she found that there was a definite battering cycle consisting of 3 distinct phases, which I've mentioned before: the tension building phase, the acute battering incident, and the contrition phase. The tension building phase is a gradual escalation of tension during which the batterer displays hostility and dissatisfaction, and the woman attempts to placate him. The woman resorts to denial and rationalizes that perhaps she did deserve the abuse, and she will begin to minimize the incident because she knows her batterer is capable of doing much worse. During the acute battering incident, the batterer explodes into uncontrollable rage, which is often out of proportion to the situation. The trigger for this phase is rarely because of any act by the battered woman. Instead, it is usually an outside event or the man's internal state. There are times, however, when the woman will provoke this second phase. A woman will provoke a man to go ahead and start beating the shit out of her, right? And the reason is because she will provoke the second phase because she knows it's inevitable and cannot tolerate her anxiety and terror and waiting for the explosion to occur. So a woman over time, it's reinforcement, right? She's being reinforced. She knows how he starts acting before he goes off the deep end. And during that phase, she knows it's coming. She knows, she just doesn't know when. And so she's on eggshells. She's got anxiety. She's stressed, y'all. I.e., post-traumatic stress disorder sets up in a woman. But then we get to, but she knows that once phase 2 is over, that the third phase of peace will occur, y'all. It's like clockwork. It's a vicious cycle, a cycle theory of violence. This third phase, the contrition phase, is characterized by remorse and promises by the batterer to end the abuse. This phase may also be considered the honeymoon phase due to the calm, loving demeanor of the batterer. Of course, despite numerous promises that the abuse will never occur again, it is inevitable that the cycle will begin all over again. This cycle has helped to explain how battered women become victims, how they succumb to learned helplessness, behavior, and more importantly, why they continue to remain in the abusive relationship. So we've learned something, and I wanted to share that. And so if you take all of that, I know you got to probably break it down. I know I had to. The bottom line is this, y'all. Sarah Boone is either going to prove or not prove that she had battered woman syndrome. I will say this, y'all. The situation is unique. It's already been said that in a pretrial hearing. This wasn't about someone taking a gun like Brie Con there in Florida and shooting her husband in the back 4 times. It's obvious that if this Brie woman had actual documentation like Sarah Boone does, then they would have moved forward with her testifying. And then they would have brought in an expert, this Harper woman, and then they would have left it in the jury's hands. Does this Brie Con have battered woman syndrome, which is a defense to killing somebody, right? Sarah Boone, on the other hand, y'all, she does have documentation. She does have that. And, this whole thing about she went from it's an accident to now it's self-defense. In my opinion, she could say that, you know, I zipped him up in there. We were playing, you know, and I don't think a jury member is going to believe they were playing hide and seek. I think she just got him to get in there. And he says, please let me out. I can't breathe and all that. And she said what she said, y'all. That's how you make me feel when you choke me. That's how, you know, this is after everything you've done to me, right? And of course, there are people out here on both sides of the issue. Some people say, well, she was just as violent as him. The prosecutor says, well, this really had to do with them getting drunk all the time and their behavior being the way it was. But she has documentation. There was also things that were said in that recording by Sarah that lines up, y'all, with this battered woman syndrome. I'm not saying that it will be proven, but I am saying that Sarah Boone will go on the stand. They will look at her police interview and all the things she said in there about him. Also, there's going to be documentation. You know, the prosecution says, well, she was just as mean as him and all of that. Bottom line is, this attorney, this ninth attorney, I don't know why all this time she wanted to stick with it was an accident. But make no mistake, y'all. I mean, I'm not saying this is a fact, but maybe she didn't want to go with it was an accident thing and got rid of them. Or maybe they wanted to go with battered woman syndrome and she was in a state of denial. The bottom line is if this case, it's ripe. It's ripe for her to use the battered woman's syndrome defense. And if they, through the state's expert who will be meeting with her by today, could have happened before, you know, this week or sometime, but at least by today, if they can diagnose her with PTSD, if they can look at everything she's saying, let's just look at it like this. An expert, whether it's chosen by the state or the defense, this expert is supposedly supposed to go on the stand in the Sarah Boone trial, and in the state of Florida, they can only go on the stand if Sarah Boone testifies. So perhaps maybe the state will have their expert meet with her and say she doesn't have any of this. She's an alcoholic, or she's got these other mental health issues, but we don't see all of the markers that this woman who created battered woman syndrome has detailed since the 70s. And so, you know, it is what it is. But Kathy Mama Bear says, all the love to any of us that are survivors of domestic violence, physical and mental, also sexual abuse as well. Kathy Mama Bear. KJ, I can look y'all in the eye and say that I've been it's been a long time. It took a long time. It took a lot of trips to the therapist, and also lots of prayer and knowing that God had my back to get through what I've been through. But I can assuredly, knowing that I now have educated myself, I don't believe, and I'm one of these types that I don't want to live in denial about nothing. I would much rather say, yes, I have these issues or whatever. But the bottom line is I've looked at it all. I myself I do not have battered woman syndrome, although I had the shit kicked out of me in the past. The bottom line is I look at that cycle, and I look at the fact that I did leave, and I look at the fact that I had the strength. Not only from my relationship with God, who helped me through all that. You can get kicked down so far that your self-esteem just goes right. You have none. You can't see, anything. But I can tell you right now, when you're laying flat on your back, whether it's emotionally, physically, sexually, whatever it is, if you're laying flat on your back, all you can see is up, and by goodness, the love of God is always going to be there. Hi, Carrie Ann. Mental abuse is why I've been single for 9 years now. I'm happy with my single life. Well, good for you, Carrie Ann. And I'll tell you one thing. I grew up believing that, I had to be with somebody. That's just the old fashioned. You got to be married and all this and that. I could have saved my kids a lot of trouble had I just had more confidence in myself. But when you're beat down like that, first of all, it's easy. It was easy for me to think I needed a man. But what I'm trying to say is you've got those beautiful kids of yours, and that's about as healthy as it gets to know that you are happy and that you don't have to have, some people think even if they're in an abusive relationship, at least they've got someone. Well, I can tell you right now that I'd rather be by myself than the shit kicked out of me or put up against the wall, or even worse, in my view. Sometimes I wish I'd have had the physical things when the ex there would tell me I was a piece of crap, that no one would want me, that there's something wrong with me, that I'm being gaslit. I realized that every time that verbal abuse happened, that was their way of trying to gain control over me. And by the grace of God, that reinforcement, that negative reinforcement that I could have stayed in for the rest of my days, God relieved me of it. But that's just me. Cindy Arnold says, getting your confidence and self-esteem back takes hard work. Yes, it does. It takes self-awareness. And awareness is half the battle. It's being able to take a look at yourself and say, you know what? I deserve better than this. And I really, I'm going to die one day. Do I really want to be miserable until that time? And in a lot of cases of women who are in domestic violence situations, they don't think they're going to get murdered or killed. It could have been an accident. Maybe the man's mens rea, his intent was not to kill her, and ended up accidentally killing her. So Sarah Boone, y'all, she's going to have that defense. It's going to be interesting to find out what the state's expert has found out about her. And she will go on the stand. This Brie Con, she decided not to go on the stand. They're having closings today, and I'm gonna go watch that when I get off of here. I hope you will too. I'll even put the stream on the community wall. But full-throated and all the way around, the bottom line is educating oneself in the crime genre community. It's a plus. It really helps a person grow to be able to learn specificity, not just smooth it over by, battered woman's defense. She thinks because Torres there was mean to her and beat her up, and there's more to it. And not only that, but it can branch out to help someone who doesn't realize, is so low in their self-esteem or the way that they're living, that they just accept it. They just put their hands up in the air and say, you know what, I can't do nothing about this. One of the hallmarks of battered woman syndrome is you think you can never get out of the abuse, that you deserve it. And I'm looking at you right now. No one, absolutely no one, deserves to have anyone lay their hands on them, whether male or female, or verbal abuse, mental, sexual. And some people are so used to it, they don't realize that's abusive. They just think it's their fault. And I promise you, if you are one of these out here that has suffered from that in the past, or is suffering now, or know someone who has, I just pray by the grace of God that you know, or if you can let someone else know, that they're precious children of God and they deserve to be treated with love, honor, respect, and they should be able to develop peace in their heart. You can't have that when you're in these situations. And these people that batter them, they're twisted. All it is a control thing. Or they themselves just don't feel like, they're good enough for the woman. So they've got to bring the woman down. They got to make the woman question her own instincts. And in all actuality, the batterer is on display with reinforcement, trying to teach this woman that I can beat the hell out of you, and you are going to learn over time that you deserve it, that you're a piece of crap. That, y'all, is evil. That is wrong. I don't, they talk about, well, these women, they provoke. Sarah Boone, she provoked Torres. She'd get into fights with him. People are going to go on the stand to say she'd give it as good as he did. Well, how about this, y'all? What if she did what she did to him because she knew that he's going to do what he's going to do, so she just wants to get it out of the way because she has spent this time where it's a build-up, stress to the max, knowing it's coming any moment. I'm not saying that's what's happened. I'm just telling you what the facts are. And the facts is anytime we see that a woman was giving it as good as the guy was giving it to her, whether it's from a Dr. Phil show or whatever, this explains it for me. Does it mean all of them, all the women that give it as good as they're getting are suffering from battered woman syndrome, or that's the reason they're doing it? No. But it's a good indicator. It is a good red flag. Trevor Lebeck said, I sure wish I had that 12 years back. What a learning experience. Well, Trevor, how about this? The old saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Those catchphrases mean something. And you think about the experience, the terror or the pain, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, that you went through and how you were able to come out on the other side of that. Folks, that's a miracle. That's a miracle from God, because I'm telling you right now, there are women that slip through the cracks. They end up either dead or they just live out their days getting the shit kicked out of them all the time. They can't get up. But folks, if you can say you've been through it, and in my view, when I think about what I've been through, I feel so shameful that I couldn't see. My relationship with God is more important than what this man was trying to do to me. But I know God knows I'm only human, and I know that that's just the flesh talking to me. All I'm saying is no matter what, y'all, there isn't any loneliness in this world that I wouldn't do to get away from someone who's hurting me, that's making it worse for me. That's not love. And if someone says, well, I know he loves me, but he keeps gaslighting me, or he keeps pushing me around or hitting me, and we go through these phases where he's nice and then he gets, it's all over again and all that. Folks, he very well might love you, but he's sick. He doesn't know any better. I'm not giving him an excuse. He needs help, whoever the hell he is. I've always been a big proponent that if they're going to do it to a woman, let someone beat the living hell out of them and see how they like it. But even then, y'all, that's not even as painful as what a woman goes through if her batterer got the shit kicked out of him. What, one time? A woman's having to deal with this over and over and over again. Let him go. Let him get the hell beat out of him every time they go through those phases there. Let him know how it feels to have someone say, oh, I just beat the living hell out of you, but, I'm so sorry, I don't know what come over me. I love you, I care about you. And let the man feel like, okay, it's over. And then let all this shit start all over again. See how he likes it. Cindy Arnold says it's a miracle, and after all this work I've done for years, I'm sure not going to go through that again. But I can spot an abusive woman a mile away now. Well, there you go. That makes a good point. That is a good point. Battered woman syndrome isn't battered person syndrome. This is a syndrome for woman. But I would venture to say that it should include men too, because some men are made differently. And there are different situations going on. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about long-term relationships where this stuff happens. And they beat down their dang self-esteem, and not to mention beat the hell out of them. Pamela Hernandez says, I was in a relationship like what you are talking about. And it's the best thing God took me out of. You, amen, amen. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Trevor Levesque says, my older brother went looking for him. I didn't know it at the time. My brother beat the crap out of him. Well, good for your brother. Good for him. Maybe this guy learned his lessons, but hey, you know what? There are men out here today, y'all, that's all they know. That's how they get their woman to stay. They can't say, I want her to stay because I want to treat her and uplift her, respect her, honor her, love her. They don't know how to do that. All they know how to do is put their dang thumb down on them. And how to do that is start off with chipping away at who their identity is, their self-esteem, making them question everything, make them think that it's their fault that the abuser did what they did. K-Tech says, I had to realize my own self-worth to get out of the abuse cycle. I'm glad I didn't have kids to worry about. Well, I'll tell you what, K-Tech, just as I've said before, and I'll say it again, awareness is half the battle. And I think when I'm aware of stuff, I ask myself, how am I aware? And I give all glory to my God. What anyone else does is their own business. I give all glory to God that I was able to not stay in that any kind of domestic violence situation, that I was able to get away from that with the help of not only family, friends, community, but also my relationships with people and on most importantly with my God. Good morning, TC. So, just to summarize, y'all, just to summarize everything, whenever in the future, and I guarantee you're going to see it time and time again, not just with Sarah Boone. They were going to do it for this Brie Con woman in Florida. There's going to be the battered woman's defense. And you're going to know now. And to me, when I think about, how much I'm interested in the justice system, adjudication, justice through understanding, whatever that means to you, when I look in the future, I'm going to say I learned something by being interested in the crime genre community. And I thank y'all for being patient with me and allowing me to share what I've learned with all of you. Kathy Mama Bear says, remember, it is not just a domestic partner that can be your abuser. I won't name names, but there are so-called friends that are just as bad. Yes, people can be very abusive, Kathy Mama Bear. And with that being said, when you relate that to battered woman syndrome or domestic violence, it's kind of a subsection in my view. I think that you can get gaslit by people that you thought loved you, or people can betray you and all of that. It's just a little bit different than someone punching your freaking lights out and then saying you're the reason that you got your lights punched out. Or the person telling you it's your fault, that you're a piece of crap, nobody's going to want you. Well, I'm here to tell anyone that'll listen, you are worth it. You are special. You are the only you're ever going to be, and you deserve the best this life has to offer. I mean that with every sincere, spiritual part of my whole being. Take care of you. Be looking for these phases and the cycle of violence in, this battered woman's syndrome in the upcoming trial of Sarah Boone. And I just love you all. Thank y'all so much for letting me share. Y'all have a great day, and we'll get back together soon. I'm going to post on the community wall that Brie Con closing argument thing. So you might want to check it out and go back to yesterday and listen to the judge. It's at the end. You can go to the very end of yesterday's, I think it's on Law and Crime, of Brie Con, K-A-H-N, and he'll tell you very simply why it is that an expert cannot testify in Florida over battered woman syndrome unless the defendant gets on the stand. Sarah Boone's going on the stand. Make no mistake. So I love you all. Have a great day and keep on looking.